What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NFL Strategy Show, Wednesday edition, talking chalk, pivots, of course, the biggest thing in today's deep world of NFL DFS, top stacks. We're breaking it all down. We've got it all updated at Awesemo.com. Ownership projections, good to go. First run of them and top stacks. All of that, we'll be sure to reference it throughout the next hour. I'm Dave Loughran. Joining me as they do every Wednesday, Matt Gajewski, Kyle Dvorchak. Follow these fellas at Matt_Gajewski on Twitter and at Kyle Tweets here. You can follow me at Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D. Kyle, not nearly as much of a bloodbath as it was in week 2, but a few guys still came up lame following week 3. We're going to talk about all of it. And a matter of fact, it appears that Vegas is beginning to make some adjustments for some of these totals. A ton of games soaring or eclipsing that 50-point mark for the over-under. And in our initial run of ownership, man, we got a number of players soaring above 30% as well.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting the way the NFL is panning out right now and the way that's kind of affected DFS. We've seen both rushing and receiving or passing, obviously, at all-time highs, both marks in terms of touchdowns, yards, completions, basically every way you cut it. Like offense as a whole, not just passing, is through the roof. But that's really only translated to chalky quarterback and wide receivers hitting at a high rate. The chalky running backs haven't done nearly as well. And you typically think of, well, fade the chalky wide receivers because there's so much variance in a wide receiver play. And you go with fine with taking the chalk running backs. That dynamic, and it's only been 3 weeks, so let's not overreact too much. But that dynamic is kind of flipped. And I think at least there has to be there should be some amount of staying power to that dynamic because we've seen so many teams transition to committee backs. We don't have these 400 carry backs as much. So we've seen more committee backs, but more rushing output. That means that kind of no-name Jeff Wilsons are going to end up doing better. And the receiving production and the passing production has just been concentrated on the easiest plays. Just jam in your Cardinals every week, jam in your Russell Wilson stacks every week. It's not been hard to pick out the good plays at receiver. And I think that has some staying power. I don't know if we're going to see as bad of chalk busts in terms of running backs, but I think that dynamic is going to at least be a little different this year.
Yeah, good points for sure. And there's a couple of variables there. Like on one hand, Derrick Henry 2 weeks ago, generally speaking, doesn't cede all of those touchdowns to 4 Ryan Tannehill passes in the red zone. Ezekiel Elliott doesn't cede 3 rushing touchdowns to Dak all the time. So I think there's definitely outliers, but there's no doubt that what you're saying is legitimate. There are more backfield committees, and you've got guys like Kenyon Drake, Matt, that really aren't seeing extensive work in the passing game. I heard you guys prior to the show talk about, I think it was Jonathan Taylor, who is essentially useless in the passing game. Or here's the thing though, he has been for the last 2 weeks. In week 1, he was peppered as a pass catching target. So it's kind of tough to figure out what's happened now and what's going to happen in the future. And I do think we need to take somewhat of a nuanced approach in terms of, okay, well, 3 weeks in, maybe this guy hasn't done a lot in this phase of the offense, but it doesn't mean he can't. And contrary to that, certain guys have done a lot, maybe as pass catchers, and it doesn't mean they will going forward either.
I agree. I think to the overall scoring, if you look back to, the 2011 season, which also had a shortened offseason because of the lockout, that was also a historic year for scoring. So I don't know, maybe there's something going on with these defenses not having enough time to prepare. As far as guys like Drake, we're still just dealing with such small sample sizes. There's a lot of players you can potentially buy low on right now. Drake maybe hasn't seen the target share that we thought he would. He's getting out targeted 11-5 by Chase Edmonds, but he's still running more routes. He's out there on 48% of Murray's dropbacks compared to 35% for Edmonds. It's similar to the Zeke stat you mentioned, the Derrick Henry stat you mentioned. I think in the long run, these things will kind of normalize a little bit.
I think they will too. They have to some extent, but there's no doubt that the aerial attack is here to stay. It has been evolving that way over the past couple of years, and it's only been more exaggerated this season. But yeah, I mentioned to Ben on yesterday's show, on the First Look show, 8 teams are allowing 30-plus points per game through 3 weeks. Are we going to see that stabilize? I'm sure we will. I can't imagine that at the end of the year, after one team allowed 30-plus points per game last year, that 8 or 9 or 10 this season are going to sustain that type of just complete their Swiss cheese defense. But it has been very interesting. And I say, Kyle, let's just dive right into the chalk here. You mentioned chalk running backs not panning out the way that that many of the wide receivers and quarterbacks have this season. David Johnson, yes, he's played a ton of snaps over his last 2 games, 95+% in back-to-back contests. He's had a very tough draw, 3 weeks of tough matchups. They've played from behind in 2 of them and then had to face a stout Pittsburgh defense last week. But he's coming in at 42% projected ownership on DraftKings right now. That I know he's cheap, but man, that is a ton of ownership on a 13-game slate for a running back who's shown some flashes this season. But God, what does he need to do to be worthwhile at that percent?
Yeah, he needs to score multiple times. And I think the way I would approach it is I'd be much more comfortable, maybe sticking with the trend I was talking about. I'd be much more comfortable eating some of that quarterback chalk with Deshaun Watson, who's projected fairly chalky, but his receivers are like fairly reasonable. Like I think they're hanging around like low single or double digits, low double digit ownership, like a 10 to 15% for both Fuller and Cooks, who both have had, I think, tied at 16 targets apiece, I believe, and both have fairly deep ADOTs, which is not surprising. That's the kind of players they are. But that gives them a lot of upside, and it does work as the perfect leverage play over David Johnson, who, as you said, that ownership, like, he's a good play. I don't doubt it. That ownership is absurd to me, and when I can get the receivers on this team for a fraction of the ownership, I'm just going to be pivoting there. I don't mind eating the quarterback chalk, and we've seen it hit week in and week out. Again, like you said, these things will regress. I don't think the receiver chalk is going to just smash every single week, and same with the quarterbacks. But I do think it's fairly easy to predict that the Texans have had a run of like miserable matchups for Baltimore versus Pittsburgh. Even the Kansas City Chiefs defense, we've seen them. They look quite good. Now they get this Vikings defense. This is just this is going to be an incredible game. Isn't the Vikings right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I saw you shake your head. I was like, oh no, did I just make a mistake? No.
I was nodding my head in agreement because this Vikings defense is
they're bad.
Entirely ill-equipped to play professional football right now.
Yeah, they're terrible. I think they're the number 27 ranked coverage unit by PFF, the number 32 overall defense. They can't tackle anybody. Like you said, they don't look like professionals out there. They're an amateur team right now on the defensive side.
It's bad. And, you know, Matt, they lost Anthony Barr as well, who was a staple to that defense. That's not going to make things any better. They continue to have guys drop. The secondary was already beat up, a ton of turnover coming off of last season. I get liking David Johnson. Don't get me wrong. It's totally understandable. But, you know, if you were to take last week as an example too, these guys are not a lock. No one's ever, I remember someone in chat last week during our Wednesday show saying, you know, these 2 players are locked, one of them being Miles Sanders. And guess what? That's not always the case. So we had so many quality alternatives, quality pivots in that price range. Take Austin Eckler, for example, who we mentioned on this show. There are always going to be pivots on a 13-game slate. So don't we have to at least look at range of outcomes and probabilities here that David Johnson doesn't have that ceiling game, that he doesn't pay off his salary, and look towards guys in a similar price range that can do exactly what he's doing and just simply aren't getting nearly as much attention?
There's a lot of players in this price range that are seeing even more work than him just on a touch-for-touch basis. I mean, you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They're a team that's favored, should be playing with positive game script, a guy seeing increasingly more work in the pass game. You have Mike Davis. I mean, I don't know what he did to just take all those targets that Christian McCaffrey wasn't getting. Same price range. Kenyon Drake, same price range. Joe Mixon, a fantastic matchup. You want to talk about a guy who's had some tough matchups. Joe Mixon now gets the Jaguars. There's plenty of options in this range.
Yeah. Adam Bahamothers makes a great point in chat. He says Vikings are not the only team that can't play defense. No, you're right. And that's been pretty evident throughout the beginning of the season, Kyle. And we're starting with running backs here just because some of them are by far the chalkiest at any position. We'll get into quarterbacks in a minute, and I'll tell you why I'm leaving the reservation at quarterback this week. You talked about eating the chalk. I will be doing that with certain players. And I think Deshaun Watson is a good example of someone at 16 or 17%. Just logically, there's no reason to completely want to get away from that, especially given the David Johnson ownership. But there are some really, really low-owned quarterbacks in projected high-scoring games that I will be taking stabs at. So we'll get to that momentarily. But when you look at the rest of the running back position, Matt already mentioned it, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 24%. I think he should be higher owned than David Johnson, but he's not. He's averaging a ton of opportunities every single week. And he hasn't exactly had the easiest draw from a defensive standpoint in some of these games. Mike Davis, 5,700. Kenyon Drake, another one who's been chalky. He's cheap. He's got a very solid draw against the Carolina team that ranks bottom 2 in run defense on Pro Football Focus as well, maybe last. So there certainly are some options here. And I'll throw one more at you and let you run with it, Kyle. Joe Mixon is in there at $200 north of David Johnson. He's getting about 26% less projected ownership right now against the Jacksonville team that proved themselves inadequate last week against Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Miami Dolphins. So what are you seeing here?
Yeah, so you touched on one that I want to go a little deeper on is Kenyon Drake. So the receiving production hasn't been great. He's been out targeted by Chase Edmonds, but on the ground, and that's how you want to attack this Carolina defense. On the ground, he's seen over 80% of the backfield carries. He's over 200 yards. He's got like 54, I believe, carries on the season. He is absolutely their guy as a pure rusher, between the tackles. And we saw last year, he can be very efficient, very electric in that role. We want to attack Carolina with our running backs. And I do think it makes sense as a pivot off of, Kyler Murray, who could be fairly popular this week, and off of DeAndre Hopkins, who deserves to be fairly popular this week. If he scores 2 times, 3 times on the ground, that probably means none of the rest of his team is getting there. And we can fairly predict that he's probably not going to get there through the air. So he kind of acts as a direct leverage play off of his own teammates because he really only has a chance at scoring as a rusher as opposed to as a pass catcher. So I would say Kenyon Drake, out of all of these guys in a similar price range as David Johnson, I'm looking for ways to pivot off David Johnson. 42 ownership is absurd. 42% ownership is just absurd. As you said, none of these guys are locks. Absolutely none of them. Everything could break perfectly for him, like it did for Jonathan Taylor last week, except it broke too perfectly, and he was basically ceding work to Jordan Wilkins by the second half. Things can happen that make these, even the smart plays, David Johnson, quite a smart play. I get why people are on him. Things can happen. At 42% ownership, Kenyon Drake, I'll be taking him over David Johnson all day.
I mean, isn't Miles Sanders a perfect example of things can happen?
He got an extra freaking quarter.
Yeah, I know. and just refused to run the football. He had an efficient game. This isn't to say that Miles Sanders didn't play well. He did. He played well. Here's a perfect way to look at it, too. Carson Wentz missed him on, I think it was a wheel route down the left sideline.
Oh, that was horrible. Horrible.
Right, so
he was wide open for a touchdown.
What was that, 50-yard receiving touchdown?
It would have been, yeah.
Right,
yep.
55-yard receiving touchdown? Boom. He finished with 12 fantasy points. If he catches that, that's 12 points right there. There you go. You got it. Like Miles Sanders' play looks great. One play can be the difference between a very big week and a very disappointing week. And we have to keep that in mind. So, it's a good conversation to have when it comes to specifically running backs, but really any position. And hey, I see you guys in chat, a couple of people asking about MLB. The MLB show, because we don't want to do a ton of movement and throw people out of whack, since this is an 11 a.m. show every day. The MLB show aired right before this, so you could go to the Awesemo YouTube channel and you can catch that now if you're looking to get in before that noon lock time. And hey, we're happy to have all you guys with us. If I hadn't mentioned that yet, hit that thumbs up. Helps us out greatly. It's the easiest way to help support us here at Awesemo. We'll get the pivots in a bit, but let's stick with the chalk and go to quarterbacks for a minute, Matt. There are a few of them that are popping right now. Nothing outrageous. Deshaun Watson is at the top. Cam Newton is at the top. And then it's really quite flat from like Dak Prescott all the way down to Teddy Bridgewater, from around 9% down to 6%. Is this a week where you think we can get away from some of the popular options at quarterback? Or should we have a tight rotation of quarterbacks? Should we have a mix and come in flat with exposures? What are you seeing?
Unlike last week, I think we had the very clear game that we wanted to stack. And then every game after that, we were looking at totals around 50, but mostly below 50 points. This week, we have 8 games with totals above 50 points. And
by the way, we nailed the Bills going off. We just got every player that scored touchdowns wrong.
So we have 8 games with a 50-point total or greater, and then another one sitting at 49.5. Part of this, like you guys mentioned at the top, is more scoring overall in the NFL. But it's also, there's a lot of teams in really good matchups. So to your point, spreading out ownership, I think it makes a lot of sense. And even going outside those top 6, there's plenty of good options. You even have a guy like Joe Burrow, who's in that 49.5 point total game against a terrible Jacksonville team who's throwing the ball about 50 times a game. Also gives you some rushing chops. You have Lamar Jackson at 1.1 ownership right now. I mean, I can't remember the last time we saw Lamar Jackson that low owned. He's very expensive. You certainly have to pay for him, and there's a chance they absolutely blow Washington out. But 1.1% ownership for Lamar Jackson is a bit shocking.
Yeah, okay, so it appears you and I are on identical pages coming into this week. I do think after this preliminary run of ownership throughout the week, we're going to start seeing some adjustments with these guys coming up a little bit. That makes sense. It's the first run, so as I always say, just a disclaimer here, ownership will always change throughout the week, no matter where you're looking at. I think we have the best, most accurate ownership, but once you get up to Saturday and Sunday, it's going to be more accurate. It's crazy though, Kyle, and listen, I'm not asking you to agree with me on this. I understand it's a little bizarre, but Baker Mayfield against Dallas, 1%. He's been terrible this season. I totally understand, but there are some opportunities here where you've seen pretty bad quarterbacks in good matchups win the Millie Maker, win tournaments, win the $500,000 slam. I'm not ruling him out at 5,800 against the Dallas team that's been entirely inept in terms of being able to stop opposing teams' passing games. Lamar Jackson at 1.1%, as Matt just pointed out, he's going to come back. And I hate to play narrative here because it's not necessarily a narrative, but they're going to smoke Washington. I don't see any two ways around that, coming off an embarrassing loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. Lamar Jackson still arguably the best fantasy quarterback in the game. Joe Burrow against the Jacksonville team that seeded whatever Ryan Fitzpatrick wanted on Thursday Night Football. Again, the list just goes on. There are a lot of spots here at sub 5% ownership. Matthew Stafford in a game that has a total soaring plus north of 50 points. And the Saints just got carved up by the Green Bay Packers. Granted, he's not Aaron Rodgers, but there's still some weaknesses there. Just simply pointing out, there are a lot of low-owned quarterbacks right now that could make for big-time game stack weapons.
Yeah, so you hit on one, and I have one that is basically the exact same theory. You like Baker Mayfield. I actually like him as a player. You rag on my guy Baker, but the dude was a killer at Oklahoma, like 2 of the best college seasons we've ever seen. Then comes in as a rookie, balls out. I believe it was 27 touchdowns, the most ever for a rookie passer. Didn't even play the full season. I think it was 2 games. Yeah, it was 2 games that Tyrod Taylor started inexplicably. And so I like Baker Mayfield. So you don't have to tell me twice to be over the field on him. He's in a good matchup. You know, the Dallas defense hasn't been able to stop anyone, and they respectively put up a decent amount of points. Chase Young going to miss for Washington, I believe. So maybe another reason to get in on Lamar Jackson at 1%, even if it does come up to, 2, 3, if it doubles or triples, that's still incredibly low for a guy who has 300, 100 potential, that double bonus on DraftKings. In the same vein as Baker Mayfield, a guy who I like, I think he's good. Maybe the best way to describe him is Ryan Fitzpatrick-esque. Well, let me tell you, we have Ryan Fitzpatrick in another awesome game versus Seattle, who just like Dallas, they have not been able to stop anyone. And their games, now that they're letting Russell Wilson cook, are just smashing. We saw it versus Dallas. We saw it versus New England. And we saw him absolutely go off against, I believe, Falcons week 1. Their games are just going to be good now that Russell Wilson cooks. And their defense is terrible. They can't stop anybody right now. They played some good quarterbacks, but we see, like, Ryan Fitzpatrick is a good quarterback sometimes. He can be a good quarterback this week. No one's going to be on him. And I love the game environment. So in the same vein as Baker Mayfield, I love these fun. I don't know if they're actually good, but at least fun. I think Baker Mayfield can be aggressive and go downfield, as can Ryan Fitzpatrick. I love both of these guys on the opposite side of really awesome offenses. They could be awesome in a spot.
It makes me think we're going to start seeing ownership come up on these guys, because the three of us did not talk about any of this prior to the show, but it seems we all have a similar train of thought. The Seahawks defense is allowing 431 passing yards per game. That's unthinkable. Now, Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, Dak Prescott, sure. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Matt, is the type of guy that can win you a tournament or the reason you come in last and everything. I think we can all embrace that type of volatility because of what he can do when he gets going, especially as 6.5 point dogs if they start playing from behind. By the way, Pittsburgh and Tennessee has been postponed. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, the news just broke.
Huh.
Now, they're saying it won't be postponed for long. They're hoping to do it on Monday or Tuesday. I'm going to give you a silver lining here, Matt, not to get too off topic. How cool would another doubleheader Monday game be, or Tuesday night football for
Tuesday?
week 4?
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Assuming everybody's okay and asymptomatic and nobody's going to die, a Monday night doubleheader or a Tuesday game could be pretty sweet.
You're talking to a guy who wants football every single day of the week, someone who greatly appreciates some Tuesday night MAC college football slates. I think I'd be all for the pro NFL games.
For sure, man. All right, let's talk about wide receivers here because we're going to come back to quarterback, but there really isn't a lot of chalk there. So I just wanted to touch on that for a moment. At wide receiver, 2 players on the same team are coming in at 20% or higher. Will this hold? I don't know. But right now, N'Keal Harry and Julian Edelman are second and third at the position for a couple of reasons. One, this game is projected to see a lot of scoring, 54-point total. The Chiefs are 7-point favorites, but at home, by the way. But also, Harry and Edelman have seen some pretty deflated price points. On DraftKings, Harry is $4K. Edelman is $5,700. What the hell are you doing with the pass catching weapons for the Patriots this week, Matt?
I didn't like what I saw out of N'Keal Harry last week. They basically reduced his role. He only played he only ran a route on 68% of Cam Newton dropbacks. You know, Edelman's role, when he doesn't run a full route share, I'm not as concerned just because he's dealt with some injuries. And I know N'Keal Harry has as well, but N'Keal Harry's targets have dropped a little bit as well. 6, 12, and 4. So he has that one huge target game and then just 6 and 4 targets the rest of the way. It's still a 24.5% target share at 4K flat. Another concern is his average depth of target, which is right around 6 right now. So he's getting you those Jamison Crowder type plays. At 4K flat, I'm not sure what the upside is. There's a couple guys in this price range I think we can target instead of N'Keal Harry. Edelman, I'm a lot more comfortable with.
So am I. And like you look at someone in Demir Byrd, I have no idea. I don't even want to get into it, but I have no idea what's happening with this guy. He played 66 of 69 offensive snaps last week, 62 of 72 the week before. His production's been wildly unpredictable. And I worry that you could see something similar with Harry as well, Kyle. I guess we shouldn't spend too much time on the Patriots, but because they are getting this ownership right now, it wouldn't hurt to get your take on it. Are there any concerns with these type of numbers on these guys, especially knowing that Harry's average depth of target, his ADOT is only 6 yards, which to me leaves me scratching my head a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. Harry is not a guy whose routes are particularly exciting. He hasn't looked like he hasn't been particularly efficient. He's not a guy he didn't do anything as a first round rookie on a team that needed a receiver so badly. Everything around Harry has told me that he's just a guy who's good enough to get on the field and get like a baseline level of targets. Not awfully excited about him. Maybe you could pivot to Demir Byrd, who is playing a ton of snaps. He's got like a top 15 snap share, over 90%. I would bet that he leads his own team in receiving snaps. Maybe you could pivot to him. I would honestly just consider maybe going all in on Julian Edelman. Maybe the chalk on him isn't nearly as egregious as the chalk on N'Keal Harry, who's cheap. He's going to get targets, but like he could just be not very good. Edelman coming in at lower ownership right now, and we know he has potential for like 13, 14, 15 targets and an immense target share on his team. He could just for one game crowd out anyone like Harry or Byrd. So I'd feel much more comfortable eating the chalk with him. Don't love it, but I do think it's much better than the Harry 25% chalk. His price is good, but I can't get excited about N'Keal Harry right now. That ADOT is not great. He doesn't look great as a player, and Julian Edelman is still in the picture and running deeper routes, which is exciting for Edelman and is like inversely correlated to Harry, who's been basically just like a screen and slant guy, which is not great for DFS.
No. And another thing with Harry is with a big bodied receiver, you would really be looking to get more red zone opportunities. Do you think it's been overlooked a little bit that when you have a rushing quarterback that can bring it in from the 1, from the 5, or from the 10, that it hurts somebody like Harry in that respect?
Yeah, I think it probably hurts everyone in the sense of you literally just have a great option to go to. You have a goal line back like, in Cam Newton, but you have a goal line back like they've used essentially LeGarrette Blount or like other running backs are used, like these big body running backs. That just takes away the overall pool of potential touchdowns for these receivers, whether it be Cam Newton as a rusher or even Sony Michel. If they're going to commit to and be successful with punching in short yardage work from the 1, from the 2, that like inversely correlates to both Harry and Edelman's touchdown upside. So I do think it's kind of like we see with like how Dak in that one game really kind of screwed his receivers by taking 3 touchdowns in. That is much more predictably going to happen a lot with Cam Newton. I think it makes sense to run, like he's one of the only guys who actually makes sense to run single stacks with. I think almost every other quarterback other than maybe like Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray, I'm always double stacking, like minimum of a double stack. And we've seen that it's back-to-back weeks of the Millie Maker winner has just been quarterback, 2 receivers, opposing receiver. Just bread and butter, getting in those double stacks with the run back. Cam Newton's maybe the one exception to that rule where you could see him throw his only touchdown throwing to Julian Edelman and then punch in 2 potentially. So for me, he's a different story than most other quarterbacks, and that does hurt his receivers.
For sure. Him and Lamar Jackson, I throw into the mix as well. But Harry does have 6 targets inside the 6 or inside the 20. So it's tied for 4th in the league. Just hasn't been able to convert any of them. Doesn't have any inside the 5. What about DJ Moore though, Matt? $5,600 facing the Arizona Cardinals. 38% right now. Sky high ownership projection. Will it change? Probably, but I would imagine it's going to stay very high at this price point. He's probably going to see quite a bit of Patrick Patterson. That's another reason or another thing that we can get into. Maybe he won't. I don't know. Maybe it'll just be a mix of Peterson. Basketball, man. Patrick Peterson or Drake Kirkpatrick. I don't know. What I do know is that he's very popular right now, coming off a pretty strong game. Teddy Bridgewater just isn't someone that's going to rack up a ton of 300-yard efforts, but it does appear that DJ Moore is going to have some solid efforts this year. But based on the way this offense functions, Mike Davis getting 9 targets, targeted on 80 or 45% of his routes run last week. It could take away from Moore. I don't know. Only 4 targets in that game. They played with the lead. 13 prior to that. 9 in week 1. 38% ownership right now heading into week 4.
I love DJ Moore. What I don't love about him is that high ownership. I mean, he's cheap. I think that's mainly what's driving this 5,600 on DraftKings. Fairly good game environment if you're just taking, a bird's eye view, 52.5 point total. Arizona appears to run a lot of plays. DJ Moore's target share is solid. I don't think he sees 4 targets every single week. There's a concern I have with this Arizona pass game, and mainly the opponents on the other side. Arizona themselves is playing very fast, yes. They're not throwing the ball deep. Kyler Murray, he has about a 6.6, 6.5 yards per attempt. I can't remember the exact figure. But because they're already fairly run heavy, because when they are throwing, it's so shallow, they're churning clock. They're running a lot of plays themselves, but they've limited the play volume for their opponents. Their 3 opponents, 61, 62, and 65 plays in the 3 games. That's not exactly a ton of opportunities for this Carolina team, a team that we're already concerned about efficiency-wise. So at that ownership, I think I'll be out on DJ Moore.
So based on everything Matt's just said, based on the ownership, Kyle, I hate to keep going back to this, but we have 13 games, right? And just looking at this now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13 teams with an implied total north of 25 points. You want to add in the 24.5s and 7.5s, you're at 16 teams. There are a lot of teams projected to score a fair amount of points. Contrast that to Washington 17, Giants 17, Chargers 18, 7-5. Like 25-point implied total in a game with a 55-point over-under is still significant. Like just because you have 30 and 29 implied point totals for teams like Kansas City and Seattle and Dallas doesn't mean we should be overlooking some of these pass catchers on teams that are involved in those games, are dogs, and still have pretty high totals.
Yeah, I think so. I'm looking at our ownership right now. I have pulled up my phone and I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling. Why the hell are all of these Dallas players so low owned? CeeDee Lamb under 5%. Michael Gallup blows up last week, and everyone's like, well, can't go back to him now. It's like the reverse of the gambler's fallacy or whatever. Like, I don't get why these Dallas players are not coming in as super popular, given that we know their offense is incredible. I believe it is top 5 all time in passing yards through 3 weeks. Dak Prescott at 11-18, I believe is the number. Top 5 all time through 3 weeks. He's absolutely monstrous. And the only reason his receivers haven't caught more touchdowns is specifically because of the rushing output, both from Zeke and specifically from that Dak Prescott 3-touchdown rushing game. If that flips a little bit more, he throws some more touchdowns, we're going to see a blow-up spot from Dallas like we have never seen before. So I think I'm looking at these Dallas guys outside of Amari Cooper. None of them project for like hardly any ownership, and I just don't get it. I'll be playing a ton of CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup versus the field. I think both are in play. Last week, I wasn't on Gallup, and that burned me. But this week, it appears I have a chance to go back to the well at low ownership. So I'll be playing both of those guys in a ton of Dak Prescott stacks.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that, Matt, they've allowed a ton of yards defensively. They haven't been able to stop opposing teams, right? Matt, listen to these game totals just to kind of expand on what Kyle was saying. Loss, 31-38, 69 total points. Win, 40-39, all of these in regulation. 40-39, 79 total points. And then they lost to the Rams, 17-20, only 37 total points. Understandable, that was ugly, but you have to assume that with the Cowboys' inability to slow down opposing passing games, and they've allowed 113 plus rushing yards in all 3 games this year, you have to assume that you're just going to see opposing offenses get opportunities as well, making the Cowboys and opposing teams just really good prospective game stacks each week.
Yeah, I agree. There's a point you brought up with Seattle that I just want to kind of turn back to with the Cowboys. We're 3 games in the year. The Cowboys have played the Rams, the Falcons, and the Seahawks. We talked about the Seahawks opponent so far. Those are 3 of the best offenses in the NFL. And now they get the Browns. I think there's a possibility, I don't know if it's a strong one or not, that maybe we're just overvaluing or overrating the offenses of some of these teams. Perhaps it's, the defense, as far as Seattle's case, having faced those great offenses. Cleveland likes to run the ball. They like to play slow football. I actually bet the under when this game opened because of the way Cleveland plays. Now, will Cleveland probably come in there, score a decent amount of points? Yes. I think they're arguably the best defense Dallas has faced to this point, and they're the slowest team and the run-heaviest team by far. So while the ownership is certainly going to have me in on stacks, I question some of the overall upside with these games just because of the small sample we've been dealing with.
Yeah, look, very fair point. And that's on Monday's show, Adam Scher and Josh Engelman and I talked about how projecting game scripts can be useless at times because you might have a competitive spot and you're right. They love to run the football. They're forced to run the football, or not forced to run the football, but they want to run the football in a close enough game where they can just feed Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and keep Baker Mayfield from making too many disastrous mistakes. On the other hand, if Dallas goes up early because their offense has been spectacular this season, then maybe Baker Mayfield's forced to throw. So I don't know, Kyle, sometimes this just poses an opportunity for me to find, and I know you can't get pieces, you can't get every piece of every game. And sometimes you have to try and predict.
I don't know. I've been told if you build 150, you just lock it in. You've got every play.
Every combination, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All 1 million possible, billions of combinations, honestly. And you just play 150 and you've got all your bases covered. That's what I've been told, at least by Twitter.
Or from those same people that you just have to play 300 lineups. That's what they all do to win now, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. But I do like getting pieces of this. Ezekiel Elliott's popular. Like you said, Dallas, very, very less popular on this slate. What if it turns out that this just turns into a game where both teams dominate on the ground, Kyle? Like they both have elite running backs on both sides of this one. There's so many different ways a game like this can shake out. And I think we can say the same for a bunch of other spots. Like let's actually turn the page just for a moment to Detroit. I don't think Detroit is positioned to dominate on the ground. Adrian Peterson's been fine, but it's tough for me to believe that that's a spot where when all is said and done, if Detroit only loses by a field goal, it's because of Adrian Peterson and Curry Johnson. So there are different games that we project to play differently, but Dallas and Cleveland is certainly one that could go a multitude of directions.
Yeah, you talk about Detroit, and I was talking to Matt before the show started, and we were talking about the show title being stacks, and he's like, are all these stacks? And I said, I don't know, I'm probably not stacking Alvin Kamara with Drew Brees. Drew Brees looks dusty and old, and I don't want to play him. He's not at home. He still plays indoors. What is he? He's under 6K. He plays indoors still. He is on the road, but he does get to play in the Lions indoors. His number one target, Michael Thomas, should be coming back. The opposing team, I'm not afraid of their defense, and they have an easy target to run back in Kenny Golladay. Are we going to be looking back and saying, well, I don't know how Drew Brees' season turned out, but that one Detroit game was an absolute smash? I think it's not impossible. I think this game is probably fairly interesting relative to how few people seem to be interested in stacking it. Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara are expensive, but they're probably worth the cost in some sense. And their quarterback, because you have, like, obviously you're stacking with your quarterback, their quarterback is so cheap and it gets you off of a ton of popular, expensive plays that stacking them might not be absolutely crazy. So I'm interested in this spot. Matt kind of talked me onto it after me kind of ragging on Drew Brees looking dusty and old and,
Yeah, Matt, did you see the graphic at the beginning of this Sunday night football game about Drew Brees' ADOT over the past 6 years, that it's been bottom 4 in the league and last in the last 3 seasons, something crazy like that. Yet he still manages to do enough. I'm with Kyle. He does look, as he said, dusty and old. He does not look like prime Drew Brees by any stretch at all. But what was it about this that had you talking Kyle onto this game?
Just strictly looking at the ownership projections, and Drew Brees isn't really doing anything different than he's been doing the last couple of years. You just talked about the graphic. I didn't see it, but I mean, if you've been following Drew Brees' career, you know his completion percentage is very high, and you know his ADOT is very low. Right now, he's lacking a little bit in the completion percentage category, but Detroit is not a formidable defense. I do think Alvin Kamara is stackable with Drew Brees. He is the leading receiver right now, and as long as we don't know Michael Thomas' status yet, it looks like he could be back. So this is all contingent on what Michael Thomas does. But if Thomas is out, Kamara is very clearly his number one wide receiver. So there is stacking potential there. And obviously, if Thomas plays, that's a stack you want.
Yeah. And if you just take a very basic look on the season at targets, well, Alvin Kamara is 5th in the league in targets. Sorry, well, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 5th in the league. Not at his position. He's 5th in the entire league. And those are very reliable receptions too. You know, he's been targeted 31 times. He has 27 receptions. So even if you're not stacking him with Drew Brees, one thing you can pretty much assure yourself of is that he's going to give you a touchdown or more in receptions alone, even if he gains 0 yards. And that's valuable to me. Matt, what about Stafford on the other side? He got Kenny Golladay back last week. Not a spectacular game, but kind of picking up where he left off in 2019, found the end zone right away, his first game back. Stafford hasn't had that breakout game yet, but Kyle and I talked about it last week. This guy was on pace for 5,000 yards and almost 40 touchdowns last year. My assumption is that in order to stay competitive, they're going to have to throw. And well, interceptions are only worth minus 1 point. So I can't put too much weight on that. And he also is on a team. I'm not trying to sell anyone here. I'm just giving you my reasoning for it. He's on a team that has really 3 guys that they're going to throw the football to. And I kind of love these spots at low ownership because Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, and TJ Hawkinson are the 3 guys that are really going to soak up the majority of opportunities when they're healthy. If they're going to come in super low owned, and I know that I don't have to get 1 guy out of 5 right or out of 6 right, and they don't have a really stout run game, this is kind of a spot that I'm willing to take chances on because I don't need to get nearly as much right. I just need to get the fact that they score points right, and it's probably going to be able to parlay that into points for whoever I roster, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I'm slightly interested in the Matthew Stafford call. This is a really interesting situation to me. I've been trying to figure out this New Orleans defense. It's a defense that I really expected to be solid coming into the year. They have 3 solid corners. They have a couple of solid safeties, and they have a good pass rush. When you look at passer ratings allowed, the only one below 100 is Janoris Jenkins. So why is that? Is it because they faced a lot of really good opponents? I mean, they faced Tom Brady, Derek Carr, and Aaron Rodgers. I don't think you can make that case at this point. So, at this point, it's starting to become a trend and not a blip on the radar, which has me at least interested in Matthew Stafford in a game environment that should be conducive to passing.
How about you, Kyle? Do you guys let's talk about pivots for a minute here. I think we've already done a lot of pivots. So like at quarterback position, I don't think we need to talk much more about that. We already hit on those. Running backs, we talked about a lot of mid-range guys. Any other low-owned running backs right now that stand out to you, Kyle?
Yeah, I would say in terms of running back, I'm still more inclined to go with the chalkier plays outside of David Johnson, whose ownership is just, through the roof. I would say I'd more look to make my pivots at wide receiver, although I do like Drake. I don't hate Mixon. He's given up some of a decent amount of the receiving work to Giovanni Bernard, but he's still getting a handful of targets on a team that wants to throw a ton. And I don't hate the opponent is a good matchup this week finally. So I would say those two guys, I think you can get a lot of, maybe not all of, but a lot of the backfield touches, especially almost all of the backfield carries between those two guys. And they set up in spots that aren't nearly as bad as previous weeks for those players. So outside of the top guys, I like Alvin Kamara. I like Zeke. I think those are both good plays. Mike Davis playing the Christian McCaffrey role better than Christian McCaffrey did. I would say my biggest two pivots would be moving down to, I think Jonathan Taylor kind of falls in that same range. These guys who, if the game script breaks right for them, they're going to have monstrous games on the ground, unless, of course, your defense scores 2 touchdowns, in which case Jonathan Taylor's defense did. But largely speaking, as long as they're in competitive games, not getting blown out, I think you get 80+% of the backfield carries. I thought this is super interesting. Jonathan Taylor, 56% of the team's carries in the second 2 weeks of the season. Obviously, the first week we had a little bit of Marlon Mack. That's only in the entire game. In the first half of games, over 75% of the backfield carries. The only reason we haven't seen Jonathan Taylor blow up yet is his team is too good. I don't think that's going to be the case this week. Doesn't get to play the Jets. So for me, I like some of these guys who they're more between the tackles bangers, but the ownership coming on them does reflect that, maybe even over reflect that.
How about you, Matt?
Can you remind me which game was canceled? Was it the Pittsburgh or postponed? Was it the Pittsburgh game or the Minnesota game?
Pittsburgh.
Okay. I think sorry, just a side note. I was interested to see if we lost any running backs there. But I think you still want to look at some of these guys that are leading the NFL in touches. The prices are not going to be as good as some of the cheaper value we have. But Josh Jacobs, 26 opportunities per game. Austin Eckler, right now he's 7th in the NFL in touches overall. Now he's in a timeshare. Right now he's projected for less than 1% ownership against Tampa Bay, who was a strong run defense. And he's in a timeshare, which people don't like. But people forget, Los Angeles is 3rd in the NFL in plays right now. These teams like Arizona, Los Angeles, I think a lot of times their ownership is driven down because people perceive some sort of a timeshare, and they forget that the offense is so strong overall and running so many plays. It's not conceivable for Eckler or Drake, for that matter, to even be on the field for that many plays. They're just naturally going to cede some work. You have Eckler over 20 opportunities per game, and Justin Herbert is targeting the running back position over 20% of the time. This is not the Tyrod Taylor offense we expected. So those are two guys I would really like to take a stab at the low ownership.
He's not low owned, but I actually think he's going to be lower owned than he should. And I'm saying this strictly because in relation to David Johnson at almost identical price points, I don't think there should be this much of a disparity or this much of a gap in ownership between David Johnson and Joe Mixon. So Joe Mixon has seen 17, 16, and 19 carries over his first 3 games. He's got 52 attempts. He's averaging 3 targets a game as well. He's been dismal, right? Like he's been horrible. The run blocking has really done him no favors. And I know Jacksonville has done a decent job of slowing down opposing run games, but he's also played in spots that haven't been particularly favorable to him. At least Cleveland, he was playing from behind, and they abandoned it a little bit towards the end of the game. David Johnson hasn't been great. He's got a much better matchup, so I get that. But if Joe Mixon's going to be 15% and Johnson's going to be 45% or whatever it is, I will happily take some shots on Joe Mixon against the Jacksonville team, where I definitely think Cincinnati can be playing with the lead in this game. By the way, for those of you guys that are still getting in on basketball, we've got an amazing promo right now. For the rest of the finals, the Awesemo Plus weekly pass is $5 with the promo code Orlando. It's the first inaugural finals inside the bubble. We're giving away, or we're not giving away, sorry. Well, basically we are. It's a $5 Awesemo Plus weekly NBA pass for the NBA finals. When you use the promo code Orlando, it's $10 off the original price. So it's super cheap. And it's well worth it. You're getting the showdown projections, the ownership projections, and everything else that we have on the site for these showdowns. Monster prize pools on DraftKings, on FanDuel. Showdown is becoming a massive trend now. They're exploding in football and in basketball. These final showdowns are going to be paying out an insane amount of money. I think we have a milli maker tonight. So jump in on that. It's $5 when you use the promo code Orlando. And we're doing an awesome giveaway. If you haven't jumped in on this yet, you really should get in on it right now. All you have to do is go to Awesemo_com, check out the pinned tweet. We're giving away an Awesemo, here we go, an Awesemo Plus $1,000 platinum yearly pass. Awesemo Plus platinum yearly pass. It's $1,000 value. It's everything on the site for an entire year. Ownership, projections, the lineup builder. You'd still have to get the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. We have no control over that. But all of our premium articles, all of Alex Baker, #1 ranked DFS player in the world, all of his premium tools that have made him as good as he is, $7.3 million in profit. You can look that up. Verifiable stuff. Same tools that he uses, we have on the site. So why not check it out? All you have to do is like the tweet, follow Awesemo_com, and correctly predict how many points will be in the Lakers will score in game one. Just go to Twitter, check it out. You'll figure out how to do it. And if you just want to get an Awesemo weekly pass, or you want to get a monthly or a yearly, and you don't want to, throw your hat into the ring thinking that you're not going to win, go to awesemo.com/join. We get something for everyone. We even are giving away all of our showdown content for NFL in the Awesemo Plus weekly pass now, which is only $3.95 a week. So all of our showdown content for the rest of the season will be included in that Awesemo Plus weekly for less than $4 a week. There's something for everyone, no matter what your budget is. Go to awesemo.com/join. Check that out today. And hop into our premium Slack chat when you do. Talking DFS and sports betting all day long. Great community over there, loving the same stuff that we love and talking about the same stuff that we want to talk about every single day. All right, guys, let's talk about wide receivers here for a minute. Anybody that's popping at you or popping for you, Matt, that's just getting no ownership whatsoever or just low ownership?
Yeah, I need you to talk me off a ledge here. It's so we've been here before, man. We've been down the Sammy Watkins rabbit hole a few times. Yes. We get Sammy Watkins, one of the highest team totals on the board, coming in sub 5% ownership. Missed part of week 2, but weeks 1 and 3, 23% target share for Sammy Watkins. He's 4.4K. I've made this mistake seems like 20 times. Is this a trap?
Sammy Watkins has burned me more than I think most players in the league.
Same.
Well, you know what? We can do this. We can throw this over to Kyle. Kyle, Sammy Watkins has always, remember week 1 of last season? Like, if you didn't have Sammy Watkins last year in week 1, you weren't winning anything, at least not anything significant. Now he fell off after that. He got hurt, dealt with some injuries. He has been targeted. He has been getting some looks inside the red zone, though, which is encouraging to me. He got a couple against Baltimore, and at least Mahomes is willing to look his way in that respect. How do you break down this spot against the Patriots defense for Watkins? You can be the tiebreaker. Yeah,
I'm on board. Is anyone here not going to Sammy Watkins? You said, are you concerned with Sammy Watkins? I'm going in. I put my hand in the bear trap before. It's covered in honey. I'm going back one more time, baby. Give me more Sammy Watkins. And we talk about a tough New England defense, but they did have some opt-outs. We've seen teams put up points against them. And we talk about they did it. They did it in week 3. They took away the opposing top option. Sammy Watkins is not the top option. He's not the second option. You could argue Clyde Edwards-Helaire would even be a guy they could potentially take away over Sammy Watkins. He's not going to get the same defensive looks that Tyreek Hill gets. He's getting targets from Patrick Mahomes. He's getting red zone looks from Patrick Mahomes. He's no ownership or low ownership, and he's super cheap. I just don't get I I get it. He's burned us. We have to push that to the back deep, dark recesses of our mind. One more time, Sammy Watkins, baby.
Let's do it. What do we make of this Patriots defense right now? Right? Like, are they set to rebound? Should we be legitimately concerned about what they've got at on the defensive line, linebackers? Is this an issue for a team that has been carved up on the ground? And really, I mean, look, against Miami, what they allow, like 10 points or something, 11 points, they were fine. But against two teams that have a decent enough rushing game, 154 yards to Seattle, 126 to Las Vegas, and then Gilmore and Jackson, these guys, I think, are still going to rebound, and it's still going to be a pretty formidable secondary, Matt. But I've had a lot of questions about that. Hey, what do you think of the Patriots defense through 3 weeks? Is most of this just a product of Russell Wilson is carving everyone up right now, and he's just a buzzsaw no matter who he faces, and the Patriots are actually still going to be quite fine?
Yeah. Did you see this game? Did you see the ball that Russell Wilson delivered to DK Metcalf?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, I watched all of it. That's why I'm asking you the question.
I mean, Gilmore was right there. That ball was literally in the only place Gilmore could not have defended it. So I tend to think these things will normalize over time. That ball that Russell Wilson delivered over Gilmore was just amazing. And you mentioned their defensive line. It is significantly worse this year. They lost not only to opt-outs, they lost some significant role players like Kyle Van Noy. Kyle Van Noy, you probably like, okay, he's not an all-pro, anything like that. But he does play a lot of snaps for this team, and he plays a significant role.
He had a great game on Thursday against Jacksonville, man. He was everywhere.
So they lost to Landon Roberts. They did lose some guys on this defense, not only to opt-outs, through free agency as well. It's not the Patriots defense we saw last year, which probably they were going to take a step back. As far as Gilmore goes, I still think Gilmore is a fantastic player. So maybe they're more of a middle of the pack defense.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. We haven't really talked much tight ends, Kyle. Give me your wide receiver here that at the moment is being overlooked. And then we'll spend a quick second on tight ends and close it out with our favorite stacks for the week 4.
Yeah, so we talked about this game, so I won't, belabor it, but Tyler Boyd, 13 targets, looks to be, at least it's a 1-game sample, but looks to be the top option for Joe Burrow, or at least the 1A to maybe T. Higgins now 1B. I can't go back to AJ Green. I can't do it with these old guys anymore.
Dude, I'm so disappointed. So disappointed.
But he just looks like, I don't know, he's just not AJ Green. He's not AJ Green. He's some random, he's like Demir Bird or whatever. I don't know. So
it just hurts. It hurts.
It hurts. Yeah. It hurts. But now we know. Now we know that Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins are going to get a ton of targets from a team that is passing at a second league highest rate, or league highest total at least. 60 some attempts in week 2, 47, I believe, in week 3, or maybe it's like 45. They're averaging 47 attempts per game. And Tyler Boyd is a guy who he needs the targets to get there. Now they're going to be there because he's not a guy who's going to go, a 50-yard down the field catch. He's just going to operate out of the slot. But if they are ratcheting up their attempts in every single game, I'm going to be all in on Tyler Boyd, who's getting, I think, like around 1% ownership right now. It seems quite small for a guy who has 10-plus catch, 100-yard, and touchdown upside.
All right, I got to ask you guys about one more from Kansas City, and it's not Sammy Watkins. Tyreek Hill, 5.9% at the moment. Now, we just talked about how we all believe the Patriots are going to be able to really solidify and sturdy up that secondary, and maybe their pass coverage will buoy their offense as a whole. But, Matt, Tyreek Hill is sub 7K. If I recall correctly, and correct me if you know this and I'm wrong, I feel like Belichick has never been able to stop Tyreek Hill because of his speed. And I'm checking now. I could be completely wrong. Okay, he did there. Now 7 for 142 and 3 a couple of years ago, 7 for 133 and 1. So Tyreek Hill has had some explosive games against the New England Patriots. Is he just the type of receiver that can get behind defenses no matter what you do? And given the amount of weapons, the bevy of weapons on this Chiefs team, as much as Belichick wants to take him away, you still have to worry about Kelsey, Edwards-Helaire. You still have to worry about Watkins. You still have to worry even about the speed they have in McCall Hardman. Is this too cheap for Tyreek Hill in any spot, just given his upside in tournaments?
It is, and I believe he wasn't playing with Patrick Mahomes in that bad game. I think it was the Patrick Mahomes injury. Yeah, that could be very.
You might be right.
I'm not sure on that one, so don't quote me. But
no, you are right. Didn't he get hurt against Denver in week 3? Oh no, that was week 14. So I don't know. I think it was Mahomes. I'll look, but besides the point, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, either way, they just decimated a much better defense in Baltimore. And we saw Tyreek Hill catch a long ball. If they take away Tyreek Hill, how are you going to handle Kelsey? How are you going to handle Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of the backfield? Tyreek Hill at this price is well worth an investment at that low of ownership, for no doubt about it.
It makes me wonder too. It's funny. I'm looking at Tyreek Hill caught 7 passes on 9 targets, 66 yards. Hill has quite a bit of success against the Patriots in the past, which could account for New England defense bracketing him in coverage this game and not letting him see one-on-one coverage downfield. If that is the case again, as we transition to tight ends for a moment, Kyle, do we need to be having a serious conversation about how much Travis Kelsey needs to be in our player pools?
Yeah, I think you should always have that conversation. You have that conversation with any guy who's getting targets from Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Like, any guy who projects for like 0.1 targets from Patrick Mahomes, I'm like, that's maybe a touchdown. That's maybe 2 touchdowns. Maybe he catches 2 on the one Patrick Mahomes throw. I don't know. The guy does crazy things. If Travis Kelsey is going to get a majority, a plurality of the targets in this game, a game environment that looks great, the Patriots defense, I think, yeah, they'll probably be a top 10 unit going forward. Although this game, Patrick Mahomes doesn't care about your defense. We saw it versus the Ravens. Literally, the dude just doesn't care. Him, Russell Wilson. Maybe you can't put Dak Prescott in that tier. Maybe you can't put Lamar Jackson. I don't know. But him and Russell Wilson, defense just does not matter for these guys. They're going to carve up anybody they choose to destroy. They look at them. They throw touchdowns. They just don't care. I would say the Patriots probably a top 10 defense after this week, but they're not even they're not this top 1 defense. They're not this elite defense that they were. Like last year was an all-time incredible performance from them. That was going to come back to earth anyways. Looks like it's happening in a fairly significant way. So yeah, Travis Kelsey is a guy who I definitely think you should have exposure to. I will say Mark Andrews, I believe, is 800 less. He's 6K, and he's coming in with fairly low ownership. We talked about it with Lamar Jackson. If you're going to get Jackson at like 2% ownership, I am totally buying the dip. It's one bad game. We know, as you said, you laid it out. The same argument that applies for Jackson applies for all of the Ravens. People are overreacting to one bad game, and it was not a good game. I don't think he played particularly well. I just don't care. We have a larger sample in Jackson and this whole offense being dominant, explosive, capable of putting up 3, 4, 5 touchdowns. I'm buying the dip on Mark Andrews. I don't think Travis Kelsey is a bad play, but I do love the pivot for a slightly cheaper price, and the ownership discount is going to be massive.
Okay. Some stacks here. We'll get out of here in just a minute. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. And remember, stick around throughout the day. We've got a lot of shows coming up. Basketball, NBA finals are finally here. You've got Adam and Greg Ehrenberg live before lock tonight, 8 p.m., taking you all the way up to 9 p.m. You've got the MMA strategy show immediately before that with Jason Floyd and Pete Rogers, Jason Ruslan and Ben Rasa with PGA live before lock. There's so much going on here. So stick around. Baseball's already happening, just locked right now. But if you want to go back and check that strategy show out for some later lock times, you can do that as well. All right, so right now with our top stack tool, the top projected owned stacks are Houston, New England, which has a lot to do with the pricing there, Dallas, Kansas City, Arizona. They're kind of flat. And then you get down into some lesser ones. Detroit, I mentioned. I definitely have some more interest there than you guys do. Baltimore, are we just talking Lamar Jackson? Are we talking the whole stack? Anyway, 1.1% projected ownership for Jackson. There are a number of teams down here that are just getting vastly overlooked and I think undervalued. Matt, who do we look to get away from the chalk? And maybe it's even just stacking the team that's facing the very chalky offense and running it back with, a chalky receiver from that opposing team where the whole team is popular. We talked about that with Detroit last week. Didn't pan out, but it's still a process and a strategy that can work very often.
There's plenty of options for stacking. Just a couple that are coming in with surprisingly low ownership. You still can get a Josh Allen stack, which is just shockingly low for him and as productive as he's been. He's priced up now, which might be part of the reason. You mentioned Stafford, and I still see Joe Burrow coming in just egregiously low as far as ownership. We're talking about a guy that passes nearly 50 times a game, much better matchup against Jacksonville. So there is a chance they run, but they haven't really shown that in the past. And then You get a little bit of rushing chops with Joe Burrow. He offers you that sort of Josh Allen-esque rushing upside. It's not a lot. 40 yards, though, that's a passing touchdown. So I'm certainly interested in Joe Burrow as another cheap stack.
All right. Yeah, I'm 100% on board with that. He's going hugely overlooked. And I think a lot of that is because his price has come up to a point where he's not super cheap, but he's also not super expensive, kind of in that no man's land at the quarterback position. What about you, Kyle?
Yeah, we talked about it before, so I won't go too heavy on it. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, the dude has so immense upside and downside, like you said. But I don't care, like the difference between like an 80th percentile outcome and a like 0th percentile, like the worst lineup, is almost nothing. I want to go from a very good 80th percentile outcome to a 99th percentile outcome. Fitzpatrick versus Seattle defense that's been carved up and a Seattle offense that's going to put up points. I love the run backs on the other side. They're fairly obvious. And you talked about this briefly, and I just want to double down. It's so different. It's so different to see, or it's so unique to see a team that you can so easily predict where their targets are going to go. That means if you hit their stack correctly, you don't like if you hit the Cowboys stack last week. I felt very confident that Dak Prescott throws multiple touchdowns. My Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb stacks are lighting up the world. I didn't realize I needed to have Cedric Wilson. In terms of the Seattle stack, and even fairly so in like Devontae Parker run back with Ryan Fitzpatrick. If he goes off, I feel fairly confident saying Ryan Fitzpatrick probably had a good game. And if his opponents go off, it's almost certainly Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. So if the game stack hits, you're probably making the right decisions because there aren't a ton of wrong decisions, unlike Cedric freaking Wilson being the right decision, apparently.
Absolutely.
He was hurt, man.
Yeah, I saw that. He's going, like, he's not going to miss time this week, but yeah, he played almost no snaps towards the end of the game because of that injury, right?
Who was that?
CeeDee Lamb got hurt in the game.
Yeah, it was like a scary ankle roll up, and they basically, I don't know if they took him out entirely, but it was close to taking him out. He's playing this week, though, isn't he?
No injury report yet.
Huh.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like any rumors on
today.
him.
I mean, they released their first injury report today. I have the snaps. He only played on 16 of the final 39 snaps. After he played 33 of 43 to start the game, he didn't play on any of the team's final plays when they were trying to, essentially win that game at the end. So he wasn't out there at the end after he rolled his ankle on that punt return.
Interesting. Well, it's worth paying attention to for sure. Kyle, what you said about, not needing to worry that if the stack goes off, not needing to worry where the ball is going to go to is precisely what I was talking about earlier when it comes to Detroit. There's a very good chance that this stack just doesn't go anywhere. But if it does, I feel pretty confident that I know where it will go. Now, I thought that about the Bills last week and, went to creative players. But in the case of Detroit, I do think there are still opportunities here. And one of the reasons for that is these prices are really, really low. And it gives me the opportunity to run it back with a Kamara or run it back with a Michael Thomas, two guys that have the highest concentration of volume on almost any team. Like, what teams can you talk about that can consistently get the ball more to two specific players than the Saints with Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas? So that's another reason why I'm pretty interested in it. But ultimately, Galladay's down to $6,000. That could be a very tough spot. I get that. Although Allen Lazard last week went off, Marvin Jones has dropped below $5,000. Hawkinson also below 5K. So as it stands on a Wednesday, still some time to go. Detroit will be my contrarian stack of the week that's getting basically no ownership. Who's the biggest fade for you guys right now? It's so early. We still have a few days. Who's the biggest fade for you at any position, Matt? By fade, I don't mean 0%. I mean coming in probably significantly under the field.
Yeah, it's easy. It's David Johnson. And this ownership probably changes a lot. We don't even know if Duke Johnson's going to play right now. He looked like he could suit up last week. I think there's a better chance this week. So we flat out don't know. This could be a completely obsolete take come Friday. But at 42% ownership for David Johnson, it's just egregious considering the other options within the price range.
Kyle?
Yeah, I'm not gonna be any different than Matt here. It's the options, the opportunity cost is so high because there are so many other good running backs who are going to come in at such significantly reduced ownership that I don't feel the need to go with the field on David Johnson. I don't think he's a bad play. I just don't get why I wouldn't pivot for the ownership reasons.
Yeah, I wanted to go with that too. I think I'm going to go with Harry just to mix things up a little bit. If N'Keal Harry comes in at 25%, I am more than willing to get away from that. To me, it's simple enough. He's been okay. He's getting, what is it, a 24% market share, I think, of targets, which is fine. I have nothing. There's nothing wrong with that. But maybe we're undervaluing Kansas City's defense a little bit here too. They have stymied opposing offenses. They've shut down Lamar Jackson on multiple occasions. So maybe it's just an outlier. Maybe they just play rushing quarterbacks better than other teams. But I don't go into this thinking that the Patriots have a particularly easy matchup either. They've looked very good on defense in both phases. So N'Keal Harry at 25%, I'm good on that. But agree with you guys on David Johnson, specifically because there are so many mid-range running backs in a similar price point within $800 of him that could get similar, if not more volume, may not have the best matchup or the best, as good a matchup as him, but just really good spots regardless and a ton of volume. So that'll do it for us. Thanks for you guys for hanging out as always. Before you head out, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you haven't done so yet, and hammer that thumbs up before you walk out the door. Remember, ton of stuff coming up throughout the day on the Awesemo.com YouTube channel, and go to Awesemo_com. Check out that giveaway, $1,000 Awesemo Plus Platinum Yearly. We're giving that away today. All you got to do is follow those rules. And if you haven't done so yet, follow Kyle at Kyle Tweets here, Matt at Matt_Gajewski, and myself at Laffy_D on the tweet machine. Catch you back here tomorrow on the NFL Strategy Show.